cold hands. This is that bassman from the thumbnail. It's working. My wife's in the back listening to Fiona Apple, so I had that glass onion kind of change in my head. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm doing black and white today, just feeling like it. Feeling all moody, and I've got a hat on because I've had to wear my wool hat outside right before the stream started, and I've got a serious case of hat hair. And I do have very cold hands, so I'll show that with a Strat later. It's a nice sounding amp. Right before the stream, about an hour before the stream, all of a sudden that amp started making noise, and it had not been making noise in several days, and I thought it was ready for the owner to pick up. Hey, Meryl, I see you there. You know, some nice amps in that thumbnail. The amps there are both Meryl's, and the cab. We'll talk about that in a minute. And all of a sudden it started making noise, and it turned out to be the plate resistor. But I've also determined that I'm going to go in there and replace some of the grid connections, which are just the cloth wire with some shielded wire. Get the last bit of noise out, because it is a fairly high gain circuit for a Fender. So let's get started on some questions. Hey, speaking of the devil, Meryl, does anyone here have an opinion on a Victoria Club Deluxe? I've passed on a few 65 to 69 Deluxe reverbs due to excessive mods, etc. Need to scratch the Deluxe reverb itch. My 68 CDR sucks. That's the custom Deluxe reverb. Yeah, they do, and they can be made better, but they're not going to compare to a real deal one. I've not tried the Victoria Club Deluxe. I don't know whether, I assume that's a reverb model, but I've not tried one. The Victorias I've had in have been good quality, but they always get something wrong in how they always copy Leo the wrong way and how the power is wired, but that's easily fixed. Yeah, cool amps in the thumbnail. Yeah, you know that. They're your amps, man. They're your amps. I don't know if you're here last Saturday, but I used Germino for last Saturday's stream. That cab is Meryl's new Mojotone reproduction basement cab, 2x12. It doesn't have the insulation inside, the fiberglass insulation that the old ones have, but it does sound good. I'll talk to you about the Tweed Deluxe in just a second. I loaded it with an ET65 on the left, that's what the Royer's on, and a Veteran 30 on the right, and it sounds massive. It's got a ton of low end because it's a very large dimension closed back 2x12. So it plays nicely with the Germino and the Bassman. So the Club Deluxe Victoria is a Tweed Deluxe. That'd be a good amp, but it's a very different amp than a Deluxe Reverb. So if you're looking for a Deluxe Reverb, it's not the same thing at all as a Tweed Deluxe. So I'll call you. We'll talk about that. Also, speaking of calling people, Bill Avanda, I need to give you a call. Maybe I can do it after this stream. Sorry I missed you last weekend. I had my phone in Do Not Disturb, and I didn't realize that you were trying to get in touch with me. And then this week's been crazy busy. And the one day I had time to call you was the day Verizon went out nationally, so I couldn't call you. And then after that, I've just been swamped. But I'll make time for you today, either tomorrow. Either we'll fix your Deluxe without shipping it, or you can ship it, if you still have patience with me. Sorry, it's been one of those weeks. Speaking of one of those weeks, last Monday I ordered a ton of parts, about $400 total to finish up like 5 or 6 amps. So some of it from Mauser, some of it from CE Distribution. This is not a slam on CE distribution. But Mauser shipped FedEx ground. I ordered all the stuff Monday. It arrived Wednesday from Mauser. The stuff from CE shipped the same day. Phoenix rather than Texas, so a little bit farther. UPS had it in Memphis at the warehouse on Thursday. And then on Friday, I was waiting for it to be delivered. It did not arrive, and I checked the status, and it had been rerouted to Indianapolis, Indiana. And now it's back in Memphis, and it's supposed to be here Tuesday for some reason. So thanks, UPS. However, the non-reverb Princeton that was shipped to me at UPS did arrive Friday. So that's at least it's the small replaceable stuff that's floating out there in the system, not the expensive amplifier. Let's see, where were we? Good afternoon, Joe. Aloha, Victor, everyone. Hey, Bill. My son absolutely needs the Marshall logo. What year's JCM800 combos are the least problematic? Well, the best ones are going to be the 80s. Is the volume much lower than normal? I have decreased the volume a little bit because I noticed it was clipping in some of my previous ones when I spoke loudly. I just turned it up a little bit on the vocal. Is that better? I was just getting a couple artifacts. Now, there may be some times when my audio does have some glitches because there's a Logic thing and a Mac OS update thing that I'm still fighting. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the live part of the chat so that if the sound gets weird and distorted like last time, I won't subject you to it very long. But it's always something. It's always something. No matter what I do, I have it running perfectly, then the world changes around me. But the 80s JCM800 combos in the late 70s are the least problematic. But don't get a split channel reverb. Those amps are specifically not very good. And another, since you're an early bird, Germino Friedman for Plexi. Now, I was talking to, I've spoken to Dave about this, and I was talking to Greg about this week and a half ago. Plexi means different things to different people. What is your Plexi sound? Greg's amps are voiced more like a pre-super lead. So the Monterey, the JTM50, the JTM45, and some of the, think of them as kind of in between a bass or super bass and a lead or super lead. They're not as bright as a super lead. They're not as woofy as a bass, but they are voiced very smooth. He loves the Allman Brothers, and that is a sound that was made by Marshalls, which had plexiglass acrylic on the panels. But there's also the 68 super lead sound, which also happened to have Perspex acrylic plexi on the panels, and it's an entirely different sounding amp. So if you're into the Van Halen thing, you're going to want that. If you're into the Allman Brothers thing, the Germino wins. And if you want something more along the lines of, Zeppelin, you might be happier with a super lead without the bright cap, because a lot of the Zeppelin stuff is a fairly clean but very loud sound. But you won't get that without a lot of hiss from a stock super lead. But Friedman and Germino both make quite excellent Marshall Plexi variants. It depends on what the sound you're looking for is. So you can get a lot of things with either, but I cannot get a Van Halen sound out of this Germino. I mean, it doesn't have a bright cap. It's got a lot of lows. It just is not possible. But it's really hard to make a super lead do live at Fillmore East. So it depends what you want. Thank you, Victor. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. All right, so 57 custom champ is out of the question, but what good quality tube amp can be recommended for apartment use? Well, the age-old answer to that is a Princeton reverb, and the Princeton reverb reissues are quite good. I show in some of my videos how to make them even mo better. But, if you can't get a usable sound with the Princeton reverb at apartment levels, something is wrong, and it's not the amp. A deluxe reverb can also work. I've shown how a deluxe reverb can work for late night practice at home in an apartment with a sleeping baby just keeping the volume just at 2. But again, I don't know that everyone needs a tube amp for apartment use for practice purposes. Now, there are fine things about how to play a higher gain amp. Even this Germino, when you have a potential for feedback, you've got to learn all that because you have the interaction with the speakers. And that's almost a separate skill from just running your scales and learning your chords and your modes and everything, working on your rhythm. But to work on the scales and the modes and rhythm and getting your timing down and all that stuff, where you don't have to, you can take the speaker interaction out, get an HG stomp. Is that what's called, HX stomp or a Tone X or whatever, or just plug into GarageBand and get the Neural DSP free plugin and get some sounds on there, because you will not get evicted, because you will only be at the level of your laptop or your headphones or whatever powered monitors you use, and you can, for practice purposes at an apartment, really does make sense. But if you want a tube amp, there's a reason the Princeton Reverb has been a very popular amp for a very long time. Hey, Matt, I hope you're getting better there in South Carolina. A cold is no fun. Oh, you're getting some winter weather. Where in South Carolina are you? Because if you're in Charleston, your idea of winter weather is very different than the rest of ours. Hey, Marcus, I built a Mojitone J1045, not showing any plate current on my Eurotube's bias probe. Any ideas of what it could be? Well, I don't use a bias probe, but if depending on how comfortable you are being inside a live amp, if you're very, very careful and measure your DC voltage, you should have plate voltage, you should have screen voltage, you should have negative DC at pin 5, the grid, and you should have a solid connection to ground at pins 1 and 8. You may have a 1 ohm resistor from pins 1 and 8 to ground. I don't know what Mojitone did there. I don't know whether there's an issue with your amp or an issue with your bias probe, but I don't use bias probes myself, so I'm not sure how the Eurotube's bias probe tells you plate current, whether it's actually calculating plate voltage, taking out the screen estimate of the screen current or whatever. There's a lot of ways you can skin that particular cat. Hey, Matt, when increasing the EL84 screen resistors on an AC30 from 100R to 1.5K or above, do I tend to increase the original 1.5 grid resistors to a certain amount as well? I do. I'll usually bring the grid stoppers up, not the grid stoppers, sorry, the screen grids to 1K. Above 1K, I begin to hear a little more compression than I like, and 1K does the trick. In an amp where it's physically easy to do it, I will increase the grid stoppers from 1.5K to 3K, either replacing the grid stoppers or putting new ones in series. Some boxes will have the grid stoppers on the board, then I'll just add another 1.5K in series at the grid. It's not a necessary thing to do, but it can be very nice. It's about keeping the time constant the same as the original circuit, but it's pretty minor. Hey, DK, watched many of my videos, but haven't seen the issue you're having. It's a Blues Junior. It works, sounds good, but makes all this noise that sounds like interference. Oh, it could be a lot of things. If you're talking about like a staticky sound that comes in, you probably would benefit from pulling the board, making sure that all the solder joints on the input jack and all the pots are unbroken, because you could have a broken solder joint in one of those areas. It would cut in and out. Be careful pulling the board down and out if you feel comfortable getting in there, because you can break the ribbon cables connecting to the small board. You could have a faulty grid stopper somewhere. You could have some kind of issue. I think you probably need to take it to a tech, but it's not the world's easiest amp to work on. The first thing you can do, if you take off the back of that amp, and remember from my videos, slightly loosen the big screws on the side before you take the rear panel off, or the wood can break where it gets thin around the cutout. Once that's off, at the far right of the amp, just to the right beneath the input jack, there's a screw going to chassis, and that is the ground for the entire preamp. Make sure that that screw is tight, just in case. That could also be a problem that would have that kind of symptom if it was just a partially connected ground. You could also have really bad noise in your electrical environment or a bad tube, but it's hard for me to tell from here. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Hey, old guy, it's not done. We sidetracked. We had a lot of things going on. We sidetracked to finish up the porch, or at least get the ceiling up on the porch, because we're doing the porch remodel at the same time. And I'm about to get back to the bathroom. The next thing I need to do is fur out one wall with 2x2s to bring that wall deeper. And I've got to put in a crossbar for the sink to secure to, and do another bar for the hot and cold taps to be secured to, because I've got some little elbow copper things that'll poke out from the wall, and let me attach the hardware there. And then it's time to insulate and then drywall. And I'm debating whether to do all the drywall myself or to hire a crew to come in and get all that drywall installed over a long weekend and save my back. It's one of those things, I know how to do it. I would save money doing it myself, but I would not save time. And I hate doing drywall. And it's also a little bit difficult because it's a 11.5-foot ceiling. And so getting this, I can do it using ladders and T-braces and stuff, but you know, a drywall crew is going to come in there with a specialized miniature scaffold and two guys who can get that panel up real fast, and they're going to have a specialized tool, zip, zip, zip. So I'm just going to make sure that all the spacing on the studs and the ceiling joists are to code. I'm going to get the new ceiling fan, electric vent and light installed and ready for them, and do the wiring for the new 4-inch recessed LEDs, and probably hire a crew at least to do the ceiling part for me, because it's just one of me. And Nikki's strong, but she's only 5'3", and it's not really in her wheelhouse. So there'll be more. The important thing is the house is no longer falling apart. I replaced the rotted sill and all the rotted floor joists, and I've got a solid floor, and all the cast iron drains are out, and all the galvanized steel, corroded galvanized steel, and lead, and all the 70s plastic that cracks, the ugly stuff, all that's out, and it's all fresh PVC and PEX now. So that was a lot of work. Hey, Martin. What are my thoughts on grounding the input jack and preamp grounds to a nearby terminal strip with a nylock nut to help guard against noise from loosening hardware in between services? Hey, Rhythm and Blues. I wouldn't use a terminal strip. You know, you can use a little ground lug. I wouldn't use a terminal strip. Those things are you never get as clean a solder joint to a terminal strip as to a ground lug for this application. But I would do that for the preamp grounds. I wouldn't rely on the jack for the total preamp ground, but input jacks, it's going to depend on the style. If it's a switchcraft and to a metal chassis, unless you've got some kind of acrylic faceplate where you can't really crank them tight, that ground is going to be secure enough from the jack for 30, 40 years. And they don't, once the switchcraft 12A with a 3/8-inch tooth, internal tooth washer is really tight, it's not going anywhere. But if you want to add, in that case, a very short second ground, it'd be fine. You wouldn't get a loop from a very short path from a jack to another point on the chassis right there. But it's not necessary. Man, the standard magnetones are expensive enough. I think point to point is just going to be a money grab. I have no assurance that they're going to do a fantastic job, but maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe they'll do it. Yeah, I'm gonna get the moisture-proof drywall, Paul. Yeah, I'm gonna get the good stuff. It's a relatively small bathroom, about 8 by 6 by 11.5, so tall but not very big. But I'm gonna spend for the good stuff, and then we're gonna do about a 4 foot high beadboard going across. It'll look like um, with a ledge, and the ledge will broaden into a shelf at one point. It'll look very nice. The house was from 1912, so I'm going for kind of Edwardian cottage kind of thing. Hey, stuck in the bit. Thank you very much. You play through a stereo chorus 400 and an early deuce PV. Yeah, PV. Those. Hey, if those amps are working for you, those amps are working for you. There's nothing wrong with a PV when it's working. The thing that people have not understood when I've said this in streams is I can't recommend buying a new PV because the new company is not what it was. And when it comes to some of the popular tube amp models, like say the Delta Blues, the Classic 30, the Classic 50, they use some very specialized parts that you could only get from PV. And PV's parts department has basically vanished in the last 5 years. It used to be I could call Meridian, Mississippi, talk to someone who knew all their stuff, order any part that they had made, put in an amp in the last 30 years. They had them. They had a whole bunch of stuff. It's a very different company now. So my only caveat to people looking at a PV tube amp, especially the stuff like the classic series where they had like spider pot connections and stuff, it can be really hard to get a replacement part. But if the old Deuce and stereo chorus are working for you, perfect. Been used on an awful lot of records. Old Guy Rocks. No, the Custom Shop 64 Deluxe Reverb is absolute crap. There's nothing Custom Shop about it except that they want to charge you more for it. It's a horrible amp. I've got videos on it. I think the title of the first one is Meh, which is a kind summation. Hey Meryl, let me see if I can get that shielding done in your basement this afternoon. In which case Monday sounds good. We'll talk. Give my thoughts on the SV20. What I recommend for someone wanting a lower powered Plexi. Thought on EL84 versus 6v6 versus 34 in Plexi style amps. 6v6 works really well. EL84, it's a bit of a. It doesn't sound right to me. For unless you're going for the Marshall 18 watt, the 84's got a different character. 34, not for a lower powered amp. You see the stuff like the Origin 20 and crap that they're doing. That they're using EL34s, and there's no plate voltage there. There's no reason for them to use EL34s except as marketing. That amp should have had 6v6s. So I would, if you want a lower powered Plexi, look at the Friedman Runt 20. And Friedman's got some other amps in that 20 watt category of his small heads. Fantastic amps, but each one has a different sound, does a different thing for different playing styles and tastes. So the quality is the same across the board. Find the one that works for you. Yeah, but I don't think anyone's doing anything better in that realm than Friedman. Are there any amps which have great build quality but aren't the greatest sounding? Huh. Interesting question. I usually get asked what amps sound great despite being built horribly, in which case you get into Magnetone and old Ampegs. Well, here's one of the things, and I will say this: it is possible for an amp to be beautifully built and boring to people, but if it's really well built, it's unlikely to fail, so it's less likely to come to a shop of a repair tech like me. So I've not experienced every amp on the market. It's possible that someone has made a completely bulletproof, wonderful amp. It doesn't sound great, but on paper, everything's perfect, but it never blows up or has problems. So I don't really have a good answer for that, Sash. Hey, randomly selected unit. I can't tell you what the average signal noise ratio is because because I don't even know how to express that in English terms. I mean, you can say, I guess you could say things like 7.3 to 1 or whatever, but it's just kind of in my case at least, I approach it very much from experience. Hey, I've played a lot of deluxe reverbs. I know what they're capable, what the noise ratio is capable of being like. I've played a lot of Marshalls and different models of Marshalls. I know what the noise floor is capable of being like, and I know when to say, okay, well, the bright cap, you're gonna get more hiss. Unshielded cables, you're gonna have more hiss and white noise. But so I kind of just know, but it's purely subjective experience. I don't know that there is a theoretical ideal, and I don't know what the theoretical limit is. I suppose if you used all 3-watt metal films and metal oxides, and every AC line was, signal line was shielded, you could get it even quieter. But I'm not. I think you probably run into a point of diminishing returns because resistors have thermal noise, tubes have thermal noise. You know, the main thing is just get your grounds right. Get your grounds right, and everything else works. Will pretty much fall in place as long as you have a good approach to everything else. Sorry not to give you a perfect answer, but I'd rather honestly say I don't know than make up some bullshit to sound important. Hey, Jack Smith. Mine's the Chinese one. Thank you very much. But it's not really the Chinese one. I got I saw the new made in China ones, where they got it right, with the sides and back weren't sunburst, and the neck profile was better, and the nut wasn't tiny. So I picked one up because I was able to get one at a really good price, and then I changed all the electronics. So CTS pots, switchcraft jack, switchcraft switch, Fralin P90s, and I already had the what do you call it? Faber bridge. Otherwise, I probably would have just put on a Goto, because the stock bridge was painfully bad. The stock pickups were horrible, and the pots were cheap and not even installed tightly. So if you can afford to have it made into a real guitar, it's a great starting point as a piece of wood and artwork. But you can't. I could not, if I were to play the stock one up against this 335, it sounds horrible. But now with let's be honest, if I were to take this to a luthier to have all that done, or a guitar tech to have all that done, between the Fralins and all the pots and all the work, it'd probably be $400 to $500 added to a $700 guitar. So let's say $1,200 to $1,500 for that guitar with all the ideal upgrades. For $1,500, you'd probably get a bone nut done as well. I've not done that yet. But at that point, let's say a $1,200 guitar, I can play it right next to this $4,000 335, and it still holds up. It sounds great. It plays really well. I can alternate between the guitars and not feel like I'm slumming it. I can go from the Casino to my SG, from the Casino to the 335. I can go to the Casino and my really nice Telly, my really nice Strats, and it fits in. But the stock guitar would have sounded horrible in comparison to any of those guitars. I don't say would have, it did. It sounded bad as I bought it. I bought it because I knew it had promise, and it was pretty, it was resonant, and I liked the neck. What are my thoughts on good solid-state amps such as the Orange and the Roland Jazz Chorus quality-wise? Well, the Orange amps are very good solid-state amps. The Roland Jazz Chorus is not a good amp quality-wise. It's a very noisy circuit. It is built very poorly. It has really awful sounding speakers. It is much larger and heavier than it needs to be. The chorus effect is only on one side. The vibrato isn't great. The overdrive is horrible, but mainly just the noise floor is terrible on those things. It is a brilliant design for 1978. It's no longer 1978. So the Oranges are great, but for the price of a Jazz Chorus, man, I could have like 3 different high-end Boss Katanas, any one of which is a better amp than the Jazz Chorus, and any one of which will do the Jazz Chorus thing as well as or better. People are just used to Jazz choruses, and tour writers were written you know, and copied and reused. So people spec out twin reverb reissue or jazz chorus or whatever, you know, so people are used to it and they know how to use it. But just because it's a known thing doesn't make it a good thing. Everything I touch inside, and using a chopstick on the Blues Junior tubes, wires, etc., makes an interference noise. I think you may check that ground, or you have a bad solder joint. I can't tell you specifically without more information. I have to see your amp. I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if how much of that is FedEx, how much of that is border and custom stuff these days. You know, Emilio, it's insane. I was watching a video where two chefs took you around Mexico City to show you all their favorite places to eat. And I thought, man, I have got to get to Mexico City. But right now, I don't know how welcome I'd be as a representative of anywho. It's a place I very much want to visit one day. Looks beautiful. I'm aware of the history, or at least aware of a lot of the history, and I was salivating watching the food in the video. Hey, Michael, thank you very much. Building a light bulb limiter, think about adding a 0 to 5 ampere meter. Sorry, trying to make it fancy. The ampere meter. Ampere meter. I'd suggest put it first in chain, anything I overlook. I'm not sure. I would put the amp meter after the light bulb limiter, because the light bulb limiter is going to have a onrush of current that may throw you off, whereas the put the amp meter after that onset of current, it'll give you more of a steady state. I could be overlooking something myself, but I can't think of anything right now. Hey, Matt, it's more of that Kroger coffee house stuff. I mean, not coffee house, donut shop coffee, because it was cheap. Because it was cheap. We got like 3 things of it for like $8 each, as opposed to $18 for Maxwell House. Don't even get me started on what like Pete's and stuff are costing these days. Not really liking the black and white. Back to color, please. Well, I have done every other goddamn video on this channel in color. I did one black and white a long time ago. So percentage-wise, you're still thrilled with me. But I just wanted to see how the black and white came out with this. You know, I'm not adding any film grain effect or anything. So I just felt like seeing how it would do. So if you don't like this, I'll probably go back to color next week. That would explain the Tuesday delivery from UPS. Well, then I'm fine with that. Thanks, Jeff. I have not looked at a calendar, but Mexico, just pretend you're Canadian. We'll vouch for you. Thank you very much. I could totally pass for Canadian. I'm making some progress on that. Hey, Sire. Best speaker. I hope that's how I pronounce your name, Sire. Best speakers for a twin, looking to lighten the weight and make it a little less jumpy volume-wise. How have I found the volume of the Big Brother 6L6 Fenders? Planning to gig too. I'm not sure what you mean by the volume of the Big Brother. I mean, that they are loud, but they sound great. Best speakers for twin is very subjective. Most of my clients have been very happy with G12C and the ET65 from Warehouse, and they've been very happy with SC64 from Eminence. That's Alessandro. One guy really liked the G12A from Warehouse, which are the Alnicos. That was a really pretty sounding amp, but it's not a typical twin. And the other one that a lot of people would like, and might be in your interest, though they're a little bit expensive, the Celestion Neo Creamback. sounds really good for a Neo speaker. Most Neo speakers sound pretty awful. I thought the Neo Creamback sounded really good. It was a little bit bright, but maybe that will tame in time, and there'd be considerable weight savings with two of those in a twin versus two large standard magnet speakers. So those are things you should try to play for yourself, because speaker selection is subjective. I've said this before. I can tell you what's safe to use as far as the wattage, as far as the impedance. I can tell you which speakers tend to last, which speakers die because of quality issues. I can't tell you which ones you like the best. So those are the ones I'd say audition if you can. And someone else is going to just love a pair of vintage 30s, and they meet all the objective criteria. They're safe. So if that works for you, that works for you. Yeah, I've stopped using them whenever I can. The CE can capacitors, uh, I've had too many with bad sections immediately. What's worse for me is I'll have ones where the sections fail within 6 months. And so I would have a guy bring in the Princeton, and I would put in the CE cap, and 4 weeks later he had to bring the amp back because the part that I charged him $30 for and all the labor I charged him for failed. Makes me look bad. I've got to eat the cost of the repair at that point. And so I've gone to putting little what we call tag boards that fit over the space of the old cap, leaving the old cap in place, putting the contacts down, and putting a little board in place secured with two standoffs and two screws, and using modern radial caps. And every owner I've spoken to about it has approved it, and every owner who's approved that has really enjoyed the sound, because you know a Nishikon 500 volt 22 microfarad rated for 105 degrees at 12,000 hours is infinitely better than anything that was ever made into a multi-section can cap, and the CE stuff is just not lasting. It is an actual choice, Harry. Now, it's not film noir. I'd have to... Here, let's make it more film noir. Let's see here, if this app plays along. Sometimes this thing's... the remote control for the lights likes to... Let's see. Still not hard enough light for some noir. You know, I need to really crank that up so I'd have just go to black over here. But also I need a fedora, not this ball cap. Thank you, Serge. Thank you very much. For amps that aren't played regularly, is powering them on every 2 weeks enough to keep caps from drying out, or is it just better to play them? If you absolutely can't play them, turn them on every 2 weeks or so for an hour or two. That does help. But you know, if you have amps that you're not playing for months and months at a time, you know, you may have the wrong amps, or you may no longer need that amp. Now, everyone's situation is different, but that's a pretty good indication that, you know, if I have a guitar I haven't played in 6 months, do I really need to keep that guitar? Could that guitar be turned into something else? But if you have a collection of amps because you want to have a collection of amps, that's fine. If you want to just give them some power every 2 weeks, it really helps. But play them if you can. It helps move things around. Yeah, I would say at least turn them on and rotate all the pots quite a bit, because pots do get dusty over time. Hey, Rhythm and Bites, what's my favorite H Records cut? So how's it go? I haven't played it too long. That's it. Ah! Rusty. Need to relearn that. Haven't played that too long, but everything about that. Let's Stay Together is also just killer. It's not like he's got any bad ones, so I can skip Bell most of the time. Thank you, Huarimu. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Gringo Pig says, I have a choice. A shabby vintage 1963 AC-15 of unknown history, which has been serviced by Billy Bodger, or an AC-15 C1 fresh out of China, a third contender enters the equation, a new hardwired AC-15. Depends on your budget. This, especially since you're in the UK. You get that shabby 63 AC-15 and take it to Chris over there at Rift Amps, or you take it to Roland Lumbey in Manchester and spend the money necessary, you're going to get back something that is just phenomenal if you have the money to buy the amp and have all the work done. If you have, if you need to save money, get the AC-15 C1X, change the tubes. It's not going to sound like a 1963 AC-15. They're very different circuits. It'll sound like a 15-watt version of an AC-30. If you want to get the hand-wired AC-15, well, you need to make sure all the hardware is tight. It's going to sound pretty much just like the AC-15 C1X. It's going to be a little bit lighter. It's going to be prettier, but it's going to get the same sounds. It does have some advantages, like you can jumper the channels, which you can't on the AC-15 C1. I'm not actually sure what the price difference in the UK is, how steep a difference it is. I think for most players, unless they're going after the cosmetics, the hand wired is not worth it over the custom. The 63 is a very different circuit. They're almost, it's like earlier I was saying that you can look at a Deluxe Reverb and you can look at a Tweed Deluxe. Very different amps. They both say Fender Deluxe, but they're not the same at all. Same thing for a 63 AC-15 versus a modern AC-15. Could I please explain the relationship between the primary impedance and an output transformer and the type of tubes used in the power section? Hey, Juan, from Australia. Thank you for joining us. When you have, let's see the best way to approach this. The primary impedance interacts because it becomes the load on a tube type, and certain tube types react differently. They're more efficient or less efficient as the load varies, and that load on the primary load also determines what the output impedance is, the number of turns, how loud it's going to be, how efficient the transformer can be. So there are a lot of variables interacting with each other. And not only is it affecting the efficiency of the power tube, but this what's called reflected impedance. And so if you stray into too far in one direction, you're going to get some highs bouncing back. If you stray too far in the other direction, you dump all the highs. It's kind of like a Strat. You plug it into an amp, it sounds great. You plug it into a wah, an old non-true bypass wah, and then into an amp, you're like, whoa, where'd my sound go? I lost so much high-end clarity and level. It's not to that extreme, but it's the same concept. So when you're choosing an output transformer for design, you're going to say, okay, well, if I'm going to use 34s, I want to be somewhere between this impedance and this impedance. If I'm going to use 6L6s, I may want to be in this range. If I want the amp to use both, I need to say, well, is there a happy medium, or can I say you can use either? It's really best it's going to sound its best with 34s, and 6L6s will technically work, but it won't be doing what it's really supposed to do. Hey, Sash. Yeah, look at the Google the schematic for the Vox AC15C or the AC30C. They're doing it very simply and very well. They got some 5-watt resistors. I think they're 180 ohms, just on the secondaries, the HT secondaries, before it gets to the solid state rectifier. So you are dropping the voltage, limiting the current, and kind of dynamically limiting the current to an extent, but you're doing it in such a way that you're only taking a little bit off each side of the HT, so you can get away with 5-watt resistors, as opposed to doing it after the DC, where then you've got to do a bigger voltage drop to get the same result. You're going to be dropping more current, and you're going to be generating more heat. So you can do it with a massive 25-watt aluminum chassis clad, chassis mounted clad resistor, which is an expensive large part that has to dissipate heat. Or you can do it with some 5-watt or 10-watt standard wire wounds, and there's not much heat. They can certainly handle it. You don't have to do anything above and beyond, and it sounds and feels really good. There's some other ways to do it, but you don't need to get into all the MOSFET solutions. It's pretty broad strokes really do the trick. People really don't understand all the variables, and they'll say, hey, this is the sound of tube rectification. And to a small degree, they're right. But what people don't realize is that an amp which has a GZ34 cannot have more than 64 gigabytes, 64 microfarads for the first filter stage. Many of them have less than 64 because it's not nice to push that. A 5AR4 is supposed to have 40 something. A 5Y3 is not supposed to have more than 30. And so when you have a tube rectifier, you're limited in the amount of capacitance you have, which also, because the capacitance is lower, it also slightly limits the amount of voltage that the transformer can produce. There's more of the factors than just that. Whereas if you go to a solid state rectifier circuit, people take advantage of that. They use a transformer that could drive more current and give it more filtering, which brings the rectified DC up from the same. What's the best way to put this? You can have the same power transformer, the same AC on the secondary, going into a tube rectifier with 40 microfarad, or going through a solid state rectifier with 50 or 100 microfarad, and you'll have more B plus out of the solid state with the higher capacitance, because the amount of the B plus which is there is affected by the capacitance. So people are often attributing characters to amps based on the presence of a tube rectifier, when what they're really describing is lower or higher filtering. And so to the player, the only visual clue is the presence of a tube rectifier. It's not the tube rectifier in isolation. It's the tube rectifier and the entire power supply, because they're designed differently. It's like when someone says, hey, Fenders in the 70s can be really noisy, not sound as great. It must be these blue molded caps or these brown caps. Let's change those out. It's not. It's the boards that get dirty, and it's mistakes that they made in the input to the phase inverter in the 70s. Yeah, Freeman Jose would sound very different from the Gemino. So there's your justification to have one of each. Greg, Dave, you're both welcome. Thank you, DSU774IN. I appreciate that. And who are you when you're at home? Some of those usernames are really hard for me to get to get my head around, but I appreciate what you have to say, and you're always welcome. Thank you very much. It means a lot to me. Hey, Vinik or Vin, I'm not sure. I wish people would not use all lowercase for their usernames. It makes it very difficult for me to figure out some of them, but I don't mean to say anything wrong. But anyway, Vinic Mag, thank you very much. Finally caved about AC15C1 yesterday. Excited to try it out. Look for a splitter ABY to play in stereo with the 65 Deluxe Reverb issue. Any advice on running 2 amps would be nice. Well, thank you. I would look at the radial, maybe the tone bone. You want something where you have the ability to lift the ground on one output, so you don't have a ground loop. And you want to be able to invert the channels and invert the second output's polarity, because you could have 2 amps, each of which sounds great, but the speakers are wired backwards to each other, or the circuit inverts and one does not invert in the other. So your Deluxe could be putting out a positive, pushing forward, at the same time your AC15 is pulling back, and you'll get cancellations. So you need to not only be able to mute this amp or mute that amp, depending on if you want A, B, or both, Y, but you want to be able to make sure there's no ground loop. So an isolation transformer does that. And the isolation transformer also gives you the ability to invert the polarity, which can be very, very important. Like you could plug in to your Deluxe Reverb normal channel and your AC15 normal channel, and you have to invert the polarity of the AC15. But then you plug from the AC15 normal channel to the AC15's top boost channel. Well, the polarity just inverted again. You've got to flip it again. Same thing would happen if you stayed on the same channel on the AC15 and went from the normal to the reverb channel on your Deluxe Reverb. You'd have to use that channel inversion. Otherwise, they'd be out of phase with each other. So it's a little bit of this kind of thing, but you'll get the hang of it. Our ground loops always DC. They're usually AC, but they can be DC as well. It's hard to say what's AC and what's DC, because it's usually the AC stuff that we're hearing, because it's getting into the audio path, but it's in the DC as well. Let's see. Yeah, a blues driver into a Princeton reverb is going to work really well for a lot of people. Let's see, out of curiosity. You got the Bassman set clean. Let's try a pedal. Yeah, pedals can be fun. Even into lowly Princeton. Check out, there's a video my buddy Keith Williams at 5 Watt World has out about the Princeton, and he shows Jeff McElwain, who's a regular visitor on the chat here, channeling some ZZ Top with a little drive pedal that Keith will be glad to sell you into a Princeton, and it sounds really good. A lot of that happens to be the player. As you can tell, I am not Jeff McElwain. That's something I know how to play, but it's so hard for me to go from talk show host to playing. It's a different mindset. But the tones are good. So that much I can guarantee you. Hey, Bottom Kitchen, having a hard time understanding how the different value caps, 4.7 nanofarad, 2.2 nanofarad, and 10 nanofarad for the tone cut, impact the frequency range in AC30. Which has the greatest frequency range? Well, as you increase the value of the cap, you're going to roll off more highs. So out of that, the 10 nanofarad, the 0.01, would roll the most highs off. The 2.2 nanofarad, the 0.0022, will roll off the least highs. And the 4.7 nanofarad, the 0.0047 microfarad, that's the one that Vox has traditionally used in AC30. So it rolls off the highs, but doesn't take all of them off. You're not getting the It's not the Charlie Brown grown-ups, wah, 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 wah. But if you were to put in that 10 nanofarad cap in a Vox, that's what you get, which is not really that useful. All right, we're coming up on the top of the first hour. For those of you who are new to the streams, at the top of each hour, we do a 7-minute intermission, so everyone get a sandwich, go get a Coke, whatever you need to do, stretch your legs, so you know. It means that you can be here the whole time and not miss anything because you know when you can say, hey, I'm gonna go get another cup of coffee, which is what I'm gonna do in a minute. Let's see. Andler Sire recently got a 65 Princeton Bordeaux Reserve 1x12 with a P12Q. Do I recommend you keep the same 12-inch or switch to 10-inch? Well, if you already had a 10-inch, I would not recommend that you change to a 12-inch because I don't think you're going to get a lot out of the change. But if you already have one with a 12-inch, keep the 12-inch because there's no need getting a new baffle put in that amp. 12 works fine. If you like the P12Q, you like the P12Q. If you like something else, you like something else. But I wouldn't change the baffle. And if you recently got it, if it's a brand new P12Q, it will sound better within 6 weeks of playing because that starts off life as a very bright sounding speaker. It does get better. It never becomes my personal favorite, but it's not about making the world sound the way I want the world to sound. It's about having people find what works for them. And if it works for you, there's nothing wrong with keeping a 12-inch just because it's not a 10. Upstate of South Carolina, near Gaffney, about 3 hours from Charleston. Okay. I have not taken I-85 from Atlanta to Charlotte and driven by a big peach. But if I ever do, I'll stop in and say, hey, Matt. All right, we're going to take our first intermission now, and I'll see you guys back in 7 minutes. Let's see if this old thing's still in tune from last night. I changed all the strings on all my guitars. Well, I've got to do the SG and the HSS strap. And all of them, because I have too many, needed new strings. And so I thought, well, let me see if I can... I like the XS, the D'Addario XS on the acoustic. So I'm trying the warning, the streams, what? Okay, it says it's good now, okay. Anyway, I like the D'Addario XS on the acoustics, so I put some 10-46 XS on all the electrics. And as a result, because they have different tensions than the NYXLs I've been using for so long, I had to reset up every guitar. One of the reasons I've been busy, and I'm still on the fence. There's a thing on about the attack I'm not totally nuts about, but maybe after a day or two of playing. That sounds all right. Just a second. I've got a warning that the stream's slowing down. What does it say? Bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate. Recommend that I what? But it says this, okay, that was at 207, so it's a momentary thing. So frustrating. I have too many things tell me different things. Let's see. Sound all right out there to you? What's all this then? Hey, Keith. And I saw that Ask Zach is here, or was here. And so I decided to embarrass myself and pull off one of my country licks and mess it up because I'm so damn rusty with cold hands. Same settings as a 335 because it's the basement. You don't have to keep changing all your knobs and fiddling with stuff. You get a good basic sound. I think I got the treble at like 6 and the bass at 5. The volume's right at 2, a little bit above 2 because it's a loud amp. And so Strat sounds good. 335 sounds good. One of the best things in the world about a good amp is that once you turn it on and you put everything where it needs to be, you can kind of forget about it. You don't have to think, man, I need to go adjust that before the next chorus, or adjust that between songs, or change guitars, got to change all the tone stack settings. I mean, you can if you want to drive yourself to distraction, but if you want to play music, just get a good sounding amp and play the music because it's got to be there waiting for you. And maybe I'm not the best example of that today. Man, you get older, and I've had hand issues anyway, but I'm beginning to get a little bit of arthritis, and you get cold hands, and it just goes away. Plus, there's the thing that, it's like, what's your favorite book? You instantly forget every book you've ever read in your life. Playing live for YouTube, you're like, Twinkle Twinkle, maybe? I think I got that one. You got to have a sense of humor about this stuff. Trying to understand the difference between the normal bass and treble variations. JMI AC30. Bass versions used larger coupling caps throughout the stages. Didn't have a bright cap. The normal version is the one most people have dealt with. That's the one the TBX and other reissues are based on. What is my favorite book? 5 Watt World says it's either The Lord of the Rings, the whole thing, or Huck Finn. I revisit each one twice a decade because there's so much to take from it. Probably I'll try to be snooty and say Huck Finn. I also like Absalom quite a bit, but anyway, I digress. And the treble version had lower value coupling caps, less low end, and also a painfully bright bright circuit because they put a 330K resistor ahead of the volume pot, but then the bright cap is across the 330K to the wipers, so you have a lot bypassing the volume pot and it gets really bright. I do like the Space Trilogy quite a bit, though it gets a little bit weird. Also had a deep love of the swiftly tilting planet stuff when I was younger, with the mitochondria and all that. Hey, you got a Fender Hot Rod DeVille that experienced a sudden volume drop. Swapped out power tubes, that didn't help. Any ideas? Probably a bad preamp tube. It could be a lot of things, but the preamp tubes are very common points of failure. Sadly, in a Hot Rod DeVille, so are the filter caps. So are the plate resistors. You could have a malfunctioning plate resistor. But you probably need to take it to a tech. But before you do that, just change out the preamp tubes one at a time. So all 3 preamp tubes are used on both channels at all times. Do capacitors in a guitar's tone circuit make any difference? Vintage versus new, or the type? Type doesn't matter. Vintage versus new doesn't matter, though the really old ones tend to fall apart. The capacitance matters. The physical size matters because you won't be able to fit some things in certain guitar cavities. And while the voltage doesn't really matter, and you could use like 50-volt little bitty caps, I tend not to because the leads are tiny. And depending on how the guitar is constructed, sometimes you use a tone cap in a way that it needs to have some mechanical support. So I often use a 400-volt cap or a 630-volt cap just because I know that the leads are going to hold up mechanically over time if the pots move a little bit, whereas a smaller cap is a smaller lead. And like in a 335, where traditionally they just use the cap to connect the tone pot to the volume pot, I never do that in a 335 because they always pull off because the pots eventually rotate and it puts too much strain on that solder joint, it pulls out, and it's a very expensive repair to do that. So I always use flexible wire between the 2 pots, and then I'll put the tone cap on the tone pot. But because it is hard to fit a 335 through that little cavity or squeeze it through the F-hole, that's the case I will often use a very small 50-volt or 63-volt film cap. I like the Panasonic ECQs for that because I can kind of fit it on the side of the pot so it's not making the pot deeper. So a lot of considerations, but as long as it's a high quality cap and it's the correct value for your preference, that's what matters. All this stuff about, bumblebees or paper and oil and blah, 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 nonsense. It's a passive tone circuit. There are places where caps matter. High voltage circuit inside an amplifier, the material can be audibly different. You can have issues with microphonics or distortion between different materials, but it's a guitar cap. I mean, people are like, I've got to get this paper and oil cap in my 60s SG, or I've got to get this Bumblebee, or I've got to get this. Gibson was using little ceramic discs at that time. Leo was using ceramic discs pretty much from what? Zach knows this, from like 55 on, just little bitty ceramic disc caps. Nothing fancy, because they fit and they were cheap and they did the trick. I may be wrong about the year. My camera isn't steady. My camera is steady as hell. It's the desk. I keep moving the desk a little bit. I could put on the active steady shot, but then it gets a crop and it's not necessary. I'll try to be less animated and move the desk less because I've got a camera stand clamped to the desk and it's holding the camera there. Don't buy expensive tone caps for your guitars. Make sure they're set up right. Make sure they're intonated, and practice. And lower your pickups. 9 times out of 10, you need to lower your pickups. I see guitars come in, I'm like, okay, it won't play in tune above the 10th fret. Lower your neck pickup. Finally got that roasted pine Esquire built with the Murray broadcaster. Sounds great. Awesome. That should be fantastic. I see you there, Merrill. I'll get in touch with you this afternoon. I appreciate that. Thoughts on power scaling versus master volume versus attenuators? Power scaling I've come to distrust because so many of them fail, not because there's anything inherently wrong with it, but because you're dissipating a lot of heat, even with the MOSFET and power and heat sinks and all that. The time you introduce heat into the equation, you have issues. So I don't think I've stopped using them because I've had too many failures with them, even when everything was done right. I think that a good master volume is totally awesome for most players. Maybe I'll switch to the Jimino in a little bit, let you hear that with the master volume. But the best solution is to use master volume and some kind of good attenuator. So you're getting maybe 3 to 6 dB off with the attenuator, maybe 3 to 6 dB off with the master volume. Neither one has a major tonal impact, but together you're shaving off 6 to 12 dB. Now, there are attenuators, and there are loads, and there are devices that do both, and they're not all built the same. You need to have something that can handle, that gives a reactive load to the amp if it's a load. You need something that's going to handle heat dissipation, because anytime you have an attenuator, you're attenuating the AC out of the speaker out, you're going to have heat. So you don't want some fly-by-night thing. I have not kept up with all the attenuators. I'm more up on the load boxes these days. And there's a reason the ones that people really like tend to be relatively expensive. They're going to start at $300, $400 and go way up. And anything cheaper than that, I would avoid. Thanks, Zach. I just felt like changing it up today. So I can go back to color next week if I want to. But I like the black and white here and there. I love doing black and white in photography. So I thought it'd be fun to do here. Yeah, good. And I suspect he's got a bad solder joint or loose ground, but it's tricky to diagnose that unless you pull the board and do a visual inspection of every solder joint. Hey, Dan or Davia. I have a matchless HC30. As I know, it runs extremely hot. Yes, they run crazy hot. If I'm unable to modify it, would it help to run through a brown box or a bucking transformer at a lower voltage? To an extent, but the trouble is you get too low, then you're creating issues with your heater supply. The best thing with an old Bagcat or matchless is to have a tech put a sane cathode bias setup in there, so you're not pulling 19 watts per tube. So the chassis physically doesn't get too hot to touch, so the acrylic faceplate and rear plate don't crack and bend and warp. It's a dumb design, and it's usually down to one or two $2 resistors. So I really think you should have a tech modify it so that each UL84 is idling between 12 and 14 watts as opposed to 19. People think I'm crazy for criticizing matchless because, ooh, matchless. But man, it's fine if you can afford to change tubes every 6 months, but most of us can't, and it still is hell on the amp itself. Speaker wire connections, spade mechanical connections sufficient, or is soldering a must? In general, I prefer to solder. If you're going to do the spade connections, you have to make sure that the connections are clean and that they are tight and cannot come loose. So let me talk about this Mojo Tone cab. This Mojo Tone cab that we got from Merrill, it's the one in the thumbnail. It's the big Bassman 2x12. The cab construction is fantastic. The wood quality is fantastic. The sound is fantastic. The finish is great. They got everything right. It came with a pre-wired harness. The pre-wired harness had quick connects for all the speakers, and then it was soldered to a Switchcraft 12A jack. Well, they never soldered the black wire. So I feel sorry for anyone who gets one of those kits expecting you just plug and play, no soldering required, because it won't work unless you solder it. So I undid the solder on the white wire, and I removed the tiny little bit of solder that had broken off on the black wire, and I made sure I had good twisted wire. I tinned the very end of the wire, did a crimp connection on the switchcraft jack, resoldered those. So the hot and the black and white wires, the hot and positive, were very secure. And then I made the decision on Merrill's amp, because he may need to change the speakers down the road, and it's hard to solder on those, to put on the crimp connectors. So I used the quick connects, and I put them on, and they slid right off because they are so loose from Mojotone. And Mojotone doesn't include any instructions with it. So the average user would not know that they then have to get out something like this and actually crimp it in both directions. So from the sides and then top and bottom on each side. I got that thing on there. You cannot take it off unless you really want to. You really have to want to. It's not going to come off. Made sure the connections were clean, made sure they're tight, and that is fine. The other thing that Mojotone forgot to do, and it's very important, they did not use a tooth washer. Hey, Jeff, between the switchcraft jack and the metal cup on the inside of the cabinet. So you could not physically tighten the jack in place because the whole thing would just spin, and as the jack would spin, eventually it would break the solder joint where the black and white wire attached to the jack. So what's wrong with Mojotone that they don't say, okay, this needs to be secure. We need to, if we're going to send this out solder free, we need to do the soldering right, and we need to make sure the quick connects are ready to be are pretty close, or at least give instructions like, hey, you're going to want to crimp these. Zach says, it's nice to have quicks when trying out speakers. I much prefer solder when I decide to like a speaker. Yeah, I agree. And 99% of the speakers I send out into the world are soldered. I know that Merrill's not taking this on tour. And what if Merrill gets these speakers and say, you know what, I think it's too much this, too much that. We have a return window, and we can change these out if we need to, because I could use these two speakers for something else. I want to make sure Merrill really likes it. And if he prefers, I'll be glad to solder them. But I want him to hear them in person before I commit to that. But I was also making it down the road. If he wants to change speakers, it'll work. But it's nice to have them solid. But yeah, my preference is always soldered. Most people seem to be incapable of soldering speakers, though, based on my observations. And it is really tricky in their defense to solder to most eminences. You got to remove a bit of a nasty coating on the spades, you know, the lugs on the terminal on the speaker itself before you can even tend them. So it's tricky. Hey Bill, any thoughts on Ultraphonics mods, value and component choice and double modded fenders that have been confirmed via photos? I've never played that game. I've not looked at them. My friend Yellow Welligan lives in that world, and I've seen what his stuff does, and it's just adding some local negative feedback here and there and changing some stuff. I'm not interested enough to find out what precisely Howard Alexander did. If an owner brought me his twin and said, I want it to be more X or Y or Z, I would just find my own solutions for it. And I know that sounds really conceited. It's just a matter of if you've done this for a while. You know, someone that said, hey, I liked what you did on that guitar wiring video. Could I have Joe Glazer do that? I'm like, yes, Joe Glazer can absolutely do that. Do not tell him you saw this video on the internet of this guy doing it and you want Joe Glazer to do what this guy on the internet did. Tell Joe Glazer what behavior you want out of the circuit, and he'll do the same thing I would do, or he might do something slightly different that'll get you the same place. You know, it's just when you do this a lot, you get good at certain things, and it's not that. I respect Howard Alexander Dumble for certain things, but I don't think he's a god, and I don't think that all his amp choices are fantastic for everyone. He was doing them for individual players, and I think the prices are insane. What wire do I prefer to use for heaters? I prefer stranded. I like Teflon jacketed, silver stranded pretend. I use 22 for preamps typically, and I use 20 or 18 for tubes. I'll use 20s for 6v6s. I'll use 18 for 6L6s or EL34s. I find that the physical dimension of the Teflon wire is smaller because there's less, the insulation is less thick, so I can get a tighter twist. It takes up less space, less intrusive in the amp. And I really don't like using the solid wire on like an 18 gauge. It's really physically hard to get it to play nice, and it can be really put a lot of tension on the lugs of the solder lugs on a tube socket solder pins. I just think it's not necessary. Stranded, good stranded has all the same benefits and none of the downsides. Also, it takes solder much better than solid because I've had so many original fenders come in where this one wire had never been soldered in 1966, and it's just been held in place physically all these years, but over time, the metal-to-metal contact became corroded and so stopped working finally, whereas if it had been soldered from the beginning, it would still be working. Hey, Harry, thanks. Yeah, it's a good way to contact me. I just haven't had a chance to check it in 2 days, and I'm always behind on the emails, but I will get there. I appreciate that. I'm just one guy, and it's the pros and cons of having the YouTube thing. I get many more people a week wanting me to do work than I could ever do in a month, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm always behind the 8 ball a little bit. In a sense, I can be a little bit selective, but I try to still take stuff in that challenges me. And, I don't want it to all be like, oh, this guy only works on esoteric vintage amps, because that gets boring in its own way for people. Let's see. Hey, Guitar Jan, you still have that 68 Custom Pro Reverb? That's a lemon. It's here if I want to do a video on it. Just don't know what to do with it. Are you in Memphis, Guitar John? I want to get it hand wired by Alessandro. That app should still be under warranty. They only came out with that about a year ago, right? You may want to look into your warranty options if it's not working for you. Hey, Shiva Scribs. My guy is Rick Erickson in the Seattle area. I'm not sure if he's taking on work still, but Rick Erickson is fantastic. And if Rick can't do it, he's going to know every good tech in the Seattle area. So try to find Rick Erickson if you can. Imagine, if you will. My cigarette's out on the porch. I do the whole thing. We is in black and white today. I have no thoughts about the new brown panel super reissue because I've not heard one, seen one, been inside one. Thanks, Harry. I'll check the emails this afternoon and we'll be in touch with you. Appreciate that. When I see one and hear one in person, then I'll have thoughts. Muchas gracias. Thank you for joining us. Is it Flaconcius? Anyway, thank you very much. And I apologize for the occasional butchered name. Hey, Magisterium. We can't talk about headstrong. Zach's here. I need to get in touch with Zach about my headstrong videos. I meant them kindly, but I have to call things out. When an amp's not assembled, and they should come pre-assembled. It's not a Barbie dream house, and they really need to sort out their grounds. Other than that, and as I said, they tried really hard to make a very good amp. They put a lot of care into each solder connection, but they're taking a kit building approach as opposed to an amp design approach. And if all the hardware is loose, then all the grounds are bad. So it is what it is. And I had a lot of, Zach, you're here. I put that video up on the Lil King, and people say, well, Zach loves his, JD loves his. And I don't know whether you or JD had a guy like me go through them to make sure everything was tight, or whether you did it yourself, or whether Headstrong is taking better care with amps for name players, or whether there was a period where they hadn't gotten their game together, because I don't know the year of the amp. But I was whelmed. But after making the changes to the grounds and tightening all the hardware, it's a really nice sounding Princeton reverb reissue. So we're just one Mojo Tone reverb tank away from that amp being completed. Oh, and the metal braided cables, because the owner wants them to be purdy. I'm glad you found the meh video. It's the Custom Shop Deluxe Reverb is so bad. The Headstrong needs a little TLC, but it's such a better choice than that. But for the same investment on Headstrong's, from Headstrong's perspective, they could have something out of the gate that's fantastic, that's not criticizable. It wouldn't cost any more to get it right. And I hope that if they see those videos, they take them in the spirit with which it was offered. I was not out to get them. And I frankly expected much better stuff inside them. Good non-Haber output transformer for a 6G6B blonde bassman. The recommended Haber one is around 500 euros here in EU if you can get one. Well, there's got to be something available from Hammond, I'm sure. I don't know what, I'm sure the Hammond prices are comparable in Europe to here, but I don't know that. Actually, I don't know that for sure. I would look and see what look up the Haber specs or the blonde bassman specs on the transformer. See what what the secondary is at. It's going to say like 300 at 215 milliamp or whatever. Find out those specs, then go through the Hammond guitar catalog. They've got a whole section of transformers that makes 4 guitar amps. There'll be one that's within 30 volts on the secondary at that same load, and that'll work fine. Just make sure you have the same heater wires. It doesn't have to have a center tap on the heaters, but make sure it has heaters. Make it a blonde bassman that's a solid state rectifier, so you don't have to have the 5-volt tap for the rectifier to. Oh yeah, output transformer. Yeah. So even easier. Sorry. See, I'm doing too many things at once. I'm constantly making sure that I'm not getting any more messages saying the audio is distorted because of last week's. Sorry. But yeah, output transformer for a blonde bassman. You could use pretty much anything. You can use one for a super reverb. Haber's got one, and Hammond's got one. I don't know what other options you might have in the EU. Hey, Lucky Jim from Wellington, New Zealand. That's still amazing to me. People get all over the world. And last time I made a comment on that, Martin was quick to remind me that Edinburgh is farther north than Copenhagen. And I always forget how far north Scotland is. And, when I get over to even to London, how far north I am compared to usual. When I was in Lisbon, and my wife has been in Tokyo. My wife has been in Istanbul. That's pretty much the same as Memphis, and so we're very used to that. But you get up to the far north, and it gets crazy. It's amazing that the Atlantic current is why you're able to survive it all, because you should just all be in a frozen wasteland. I'm glad that you're not. Any recommendations on a deluxe reverb kit amp? I don't keep up with the kit amps. I'm sure that the Mojo Tone is good. Stu Mac is the same as the Mojo Tone, and now Amplified Parts C Distribution has got theirs. I don't keep up with them because I would not use a kit. I would get the chassis, I would get the transformers, I would get the cabinet. I'm not looking to buy a kit. There's too many things I want to change up, things where I think, well, you could use that, but it's much better to use this. So, and I don't, only reservation I have with the Mojo Tone kits is I don't like the great big fat Mojo Tone Dijon caps. They sound fine. They're quality caps. If you have an amp full of the Mojo Tone Dijon caps, there's nothing wrong with that. They're physically ridiculously huge, and so you get everything jammed together. And sometimes it's good to have some space between capacitors, space between components in general. Air is the best thing you can do in an amp because you have inverse square. So if this is noisy because they're close together, you double that, you get more than double the decrease in noise. You do that, then it's like 30 times quieter than here. You know, this is something that you can see on here as opposed to like that versus that. So every time you can have a little bit more air between things, especially things in one triode circuit to the next triode circuit, that's fantastic. But when your caps are that big and they all end up touching together, it's harder to do that. It's just way too big for what you need it to be. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. I'm not sure what you're saying. You can't. Yeah, you can use a twin for a louder gig, and you can and 34s for a louder gig, especially if you have a mastered volume on like a Marshall style. But you don't. I mean, this thing's 50 watts. This has got a pair of 6L6s. I'm at gig levels in this room with the volume on this basement at 2. It's loud, but let's see how quiet I can get a usable sound out of this thing. This is with a Strat, so. And if I raise the preamp so you can hear what I'm actually doing there. I have no idea what this is going to sound like for you guys. That's at 1. You can't do that on a lot of amps that have a CTS 1 deck because they don't have a 1. The volume starts at 2.5 or 3, and so it starts loud. When you have a good J-taper pot like that and have it on 1, I can hear it in the room, but if I had a sleeping baby in the other room, they wouldn't hear it. This is a 50-watt basement, and it sounds pretty good. Lost the mic. Back now. Why is this mic so quiet? Oh, I know what's going on. All right, let's undo that. What happened is I turned the mic pre up so much for you to hear how quiet the guitar level was in comparison that you could hear the background hum, and the background hum was triggering the gate, which mutes my voice when I'm playing at normal levels. So let me turn this back. So I have to, when I'm playing in the room, I have to gate this whenever sound comes out of that. So that otherwise that speaker is getting picked up through both mics and it blows this mic out. And it works pretty well, but when I had the volume so low coming out of the amp that I could hear it in the room, but I had to turn the mic pre way up, it brought the hum up, which gated me. That's why you didn't hear what I was saying. Anyway, it's just a nice sounding amp. And if I were doing this in a regular video where I could really listen to everything, you could hear how quiet this is. But let's try it this way. Let me turn off the amp mic. So we're not going to have the gating. So here's what this mic is hearing. We turn it towards the amp. I still got the gate. Here we go. Sorry. Now, I'm not sure at all whether the YouTube compression is going to let that work. There are things that we can hear in our room, in the room with our ears, that are really hard with YouTube. So, but yes, you could use this as a practice amp on one. And I was enjoying the sounds, even though it wasn't as exciting to my ears because of Fletcher Munson and the efficiencies of speaker and moving or not moving air. But, you know, this is a tricky way to do audio live. It's amazing that I'm able to get anything consistent this way. If I were doing this in a produced video, you know, a standard bench thing, I could really hone in on it. Anyway, Alnico or ceramic on a 5E3. I can't decide between a Jensen C12N or an Alnico Celestion 100. Celestion Alnico 100, a reissue of the early G12. Well, I prefer Alnico in a 5E3, and I really like a Celestion blue or silver in that. But you could also, I would not get any of the modern Jensen Alnicos, and I wouldn't worry about a Celestion Alnico 100 because you don't need 100 in a 5E3. I really like the Weber 12A 125 and all the variants on that in a 5E3. Also like the Creamback 65 and ET65 in that, but that's a less traditional sound. I have no familiarity with VVT amps out of Maryland. Sorry. Given the state of PA systems these days, is there any value in picking up an OG Ampeg BT15 for old school soul and funk on stage? Do I see potential issues? I wish Dustin Thsinde were here. He would know a better answer to that. It is possible to do, but you have to have in-ear monitors, or you have for everyone, or you have to have a very good PA that the band owns and uses all the time, and have their own sound guy and monitor guy for that to be really useful in a live context. And by the time it goes to front of house, you may or may not hear any difference. The sound you may be better off getting an Avalon U5 or something. But I would, if you come back on to the stream sometime when Dustin Thyson's on here, ask Dustin, because he does live sound at a very high level, higher than I've had the privilege to participate in. So I don't want to pretend to be an expert in everything. Just barbecue. Thank you very much, Stuck in the Bit. Appreciate that. Don't do the Tweedledee stuff, Tor. Build the 5E3 exactly like it says on the tin. Live it, learn it, get to know it. Then see if there's anything you'd like to make different about it. I think there are better things to do than the Dumble Tweedledee thing. But if you build an amp, this version of this iconic amp, and then you build it with changes, you've never experienced the iconic amp first. And, you know, nothing against Dumble, but a stock amp is what did the Kid Charlemagne stuff. That's all over Pretzel Logic and Royal Scam. And it's hard to argue with that. Of the AC30s with master volume, which sounds the best stock, which is the easiest to mod, and or sounds the best once modded? Hey, Matt Mayhem. I've not tried the new hand-wired 30 yet. I've tried the new hand-wired 15, and I was not awestruck. To me, the answer to all your questions, other than the weight of the damn thing, is the AC15 Custom with blues, the AC30C2X. Has a good master volume. It's not the best master volume. It's a cross line, and it's a 500K. I often change that to a 1 meg, or you can change it very easily to a, well, not very, because it's on the PCB. You can't change it easily to a alarm R. And the new hand wire does have alarm R, but it has other issues. Probably the answer really would be the hand wired with a lot of work done to it. But I don't know how often you need to turn the master volume down past 1 o'clock. And the stock amp with the crossline sounds really good 1 o'clock and above with the master volume. And the trick to that is if you change the 500K pot to a 1 meg pot on master volume, you don't have, it doesn't turn down as quickly, so your sweep changes. But when it's on 10, it's more out of the circuit, so you get a little more oomph out of the amp. Can I use a 5E3 output transformer, 8K primary in my Vox AC15 build? Yeah, but it won't sound right. You know, that's earlier someone was asking about impedance, primary impedance of output transformers and different tubes types. A pair of 6 V6s are not interchangeable directly with a EL84s, and I think you'd be unhappy. And it's very easy to get the correct transformer for an AC15. Well, yeah, the mighty thumps are the low-end response of a stock deluxe Tweed Deluxe. The stock Tweed Deluxe has got too much low end. Now, this may sound like I'm contradicting myself because I just told the guy just build the way Fender did it. I think you should experience the classic circuit before you make any changes. And if you look at the ones on my channel, I'm always tightening up the lows, but I'm making sure I don't stray from what the thing is supposed to do. Bill, I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you. Let's see. Do a video in psychedelic. Well, I could change the frame rate and get all kinds of weird motion blur with my fingers, but it would play hell with the lighting to do in the middle of a stream. So we'll do that another time. I am so far behind in the stream. Let me see if I can catch up. Thoughts on the 57 custom twin reissue versus 59 basement reissues? Are the same type of amps? Thanks. Very different amps. All the Fender Tweed reissues are deeply flawed, except for the basement. The basement is the only Tweed reissue they've gotten close to right. It's got some stupid things in it, but they're easily rectified. I'd much rather have the 59 basement LTD than the custom twin. Well, you can still slap the side of the TV. Won't do you any good, but it's done something to deserve it, I'm sure. Been chasing hum. Thank you very much. Been chasing hum in a very well-built 5F6 basement clone with mercury magnetics. Okay. I have tried so many things to get the... Where's the... Waiting for the continued. Noise floor down. Everything. I happened to float a piece of metal between the preamp and phase inverter tube, and the hum dropped about 20 dB. Should I just fabricate a shield? Is there another obvious issue? Thanks. Huh. I would have to see your amp and how it's built and what the lead dress is. That's a very strange issue. But if you're, let's see. I would want to see inside your amp. I suspect you may have a problem with the input cap to your phase inverter. If it's too large, you will be picking up a lot of noise. And if it's too small, you'll be picking up a lot of noise. 5X6A, did you use the 22 or 20 nanofarad input cap on the phase inverter? I've never had to put metal in to shield between the preamp and phase inverter tube in a 5F6A or any similar amp. I've had issues with unbypassed cathodes in 5F6As and Marshalls, where they can be very, very sensitive and prone to heater noise, and different tubes behave in different ways. I think if you're using tungsol tubes, are you using tungsol on the preamps or the outputs? Sometimes the tungsol and other Russian-made preamp tubes aren't happy as a cathode follower stage, which is what V2 and a 5F6A is. So if that's the case, change that out for a Chinese, Slovenian, like a JJ, or a new old stock American or British tube. But the Sovtex, the tungsols, the Mullard, all electroharmonics, the various tubes that are made in Russia, they don't like being used as a cathode follower. So V2 in a 5F6A could be the issue, and especially if you didn't bypass. Well, it's only okay. Well, Tungsol USA. Devin, I'm not sure I can help you from here. That's a really odd issue, but I've never had to put metal inside a chassis to shield the input of a phase inverter from something else. So I would see if you can take it to a tech as a consult. There'd be things I could do if I had it on the bench with meters and scopes and stuff that I can't do just from type descriptions. I'm sorry. Maybe bring the mids a bit for a snappier image. Well, I didn't want to mess with it too much because it's real easy to get crazy. But if I were to do this is only going to affect this scene. When I change the scene, this will go away. But if I were to change the gamma, a little bit snappier. See, it loses the contrast. I'm just going to leave it how it is. Don't want to go crazy with it. If I were doing this a black and white video, one of my produced videos, I would get it all perfect in DaVinci, but this is all live, no DaVinci here. Wires on the speaker plug inside the plug accidentally were touching. Could that cause a volume drop? Yeah, because you're going to be grounding out your output. Yeah. Always make sure on any speaker jack or speaker cable, speaker plug or cable, that you have infinite resistance between ground and tip. If you don't, you're going to lose signals. Yeah, send me some photos, Devin. I'd love to see if there's anything that stands out to me. Gonna add some hard-boiled detective quips to that film noir style. I came to Casablanca for the waters. I was misinformed. I don't do Bogart. By the time I would get good at doing Bogart, everyone who's old enough to remember what Bogart sounded like would be gone. So I love that line. Came to Casablanca for the waters. I was misinformed. I know, Jay. I know, Emilio. I know. I'd love to go to Mexico, and I will someday. Mexico City. I've been to Mexico, but I've not been to Mexico City. More aimed at us than at you. I think you know what I mean. Yeah, let's see. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. Hey, Paul G. Patterson. I've got a buddy, Chris Church, who's in Hamilton, Ontario, just outside Toronto. Fantastic. Look up Church Audio. He also was making custom microphones, but then the whole inability to sell to U.S. market thing happened, and that's really hurt that. But he does fantastic amp work. His name is Chris Church. He's in Hamilton, Ontario, and he's fantastic. He did all the amps for Randy Bachman not that long ago, so there's another vote of confidence in him. Oh, Blues reverb, Blues, all the Fender Blues stuff, they're not worth gutting them. You either use them, or you get them fixed, or you put them in landfill and get something else. But the way the chassis is built, it costs so much more to gut one and build a real amp in there than it would be just to buy a fresh chassis and start from scratch. It can be done, but man, all the holes in the chassis are the wrong side to put sockets in the chassis. You know, the entire layout is very specific for that easy to produce cheap amp. It is what it is, and the stuff you want to fix, I've shown how to fix it, but I would never take one in to be made into a real amp because it's starting from the wrong place. You're already starting at a handicap. Just if you want a twin, I'll build you a twin. You want a basement, I'll build you a basement. Those chassis are available from Mojitone, and all the tube sockets will fit on the chassis, and I don't have to do anything weird. Because weird takes time, and weird gets expensive, and at the end of it, you're running to stand still. Hey, Nicky Romy, built a Raw black vibe with reverb, and it sounds great, but I'm wanting to increase clean headroom. Suggestions: maybe drop less B+ voltage, changes to phase inverter. Try some 5751s and see if that does the trick for you. You know, the black vibe, I assume that's a Vibrolux, or is it a Vibroverb? I assume it's a black Vibrolux. But I mean, if it's a Vibroverb, you got headroom. If it's a Vibrolux, the whole point of that amp is to have relatively low headroom because it's a gritty kind of thing. Fantastic for Telecasters. But you know, with any Fender, if you want to increase clean headroom, try 5751 or two of them. Yeah, I know, but I don't want to do the third man here. Though I tell you what, when I was in Vienna, I was seeing the third man everywhere I went, though I did not go down to the sewers. I invited Nicky to go down the sewers with me, and the response was not at all what I anticipated. It was a rainy night. There was a knock on the door, and she came in. Does I knock over the guitar stand? If you're going to knock over a guitar stand, I do think you should do it like me and wait till the guitar is no longer in it. That's the best way to do it. Impedance mismatch. If a parallel 1 4-ohm speaker with an 8-ohm speaker is part of an experiment, mwahaha, mwahaha, to end up with a 6-ohm nominal impedance, which tap on output transformer to use 4 or 8, does not matter. Does not matter. You're going to be fine either way. They're going to sound slightly different. One of them you might prefer, but probably won't hear any difference at all. What 12-inch speaker do I recommend an external cabinet for 68 Fender Champ? A lot of them. Rather than just go over the list now, because I give this list out like every stream, multiple times a stream. I've got a lot of videos where you can hear different Fenders played with different speakers. Some speaker comparisons. One of them is that, hey, here's what a Champ can sound like through a larger 2x12. That's the ET65 you're hearing that. That's a very popular choice, and that's one of the ones I would recommend, but I don't have one that I recommend because that's like saying, what flavor of ice cream will everyone like? Well, as long as it's not bubble gum, they've got a chance in hell. I'm embarrassed that I forgot that riff. I used to have it down without thinking about it, but Hey, Joe. Well, if you tap the board near it, does it make the sound? Or if you play a loud, low bass note, does it do it? There are sounds that components will make if you tap on it that are not perfect, but they don't necessarily happen when you're playing. So I wouldn't worry about it unless you're hearing it while playing. All right, we're gonna take the second 7-minute intermission. Bloody, bleeding bloody seabird flavor. That's right. What flavor is it? All right, see you guys in 7 minutes. Hello again. Natas, I'm going to answer your question before I throw up on the stream, just in case I don't get to it in time at the end of the stream today. And it's an important question. Natas asks, my 5-watt tube amp has two 4-ohm, two 8-ohm, and one 16-ohm speaker jacks. Can I use an 8-ohm and a 4-ohm speaker cabinet at the same time? No, because you'd be getting about 3 ohms. And 4 ohms, you don't want to go under 4 ohms on a little 5-watt amp. It's probably asking for trouble. I was just seeing what arrived from Tube Depot, and this package is just... Not supposed to be just a speaker wire. Where's the... What? Okay, I can finish up a deluxe reverb now. Yay! And I spill things on the floor. But you can use 8, 4, or 16, but 3 or 2 is right out. All right, so let's try the other channel of this basement real quick. So now we're in the bass channel, which is, right now I got the gainier, more mid-rangey sound. And turn it up a little bit. Not that much, Jesus. Deep switch up. Nice sweet sound, more mid-range than the normal channel. Little less high-end glassiness. Not that it's a particularly bright amp. Anyway, these bassmen, once you do the AB165 to AA864 output section conversion, are just so perfect. Let's see. We're back to when I butchered the Al Green, so I probably need to speed through this. Any difference between having 2 tubes powered from one B plus node with 22 microfarad filtering versus 2 nodes with 10 microfarad each, aside from the voltage drop on the second node? It depends on what the circuit's doing. It's not just 2 preamp stages. How much gain and are you generating at all settings, and do they need to be decoupled from each other? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If you're going to decouple them from each other, might as well use 2 different 20 microfarads to get a little more decoupling, unless you're trying to get a specific sound that lower filtering gives. So, you know, when starting out, copy what Thsinde and Marshall did on the classic amps, and then once you know, get a sense of what's going on, you can experiment with some different things. You could separate the 2 different nodes on a Thsinde preamp and see if adding a second parallel node or series node with more filtering helps or not. But it can be diminishing returns at some point, depending on how much gain the amp has. If I pick up an 80s JCM800 combo, would it take much work to make it more reliable? Aside from recapping them, they don't usually need that much. Now, if you get post 83 800, where you're going to have horizontal inputs, then the main thing is just to make sure that the input jacks and the pots don't have broken solder joints where they attach to the board, because the board is suspended by the input jacks and the pots and those models, as opposed to the vertical input models, which have the pots are wired to the board, so you don't have any broken solder joints typically. And the post 83 800s also have one less filtering stage than the pre 83s. So the vertical inputs have more, and in my opinion, better performing and better sounding filtering than the horizontal inputs. But there's nothing wrong with, say, an 84, 85 JCM100 2204 or 2203 combo. The combo version's got a different model number, but I can't ever remember what that is. I have enough numbers to remember already without remembering any more. I have no idea what my wife's phone number is, other than it starts with 303, and then it's got a bunch of other stuff. I've got my own phone for that, to remember her number. Let's see, 68 super reverb. My heater wire is not very twisted. Looking for a beginner job to do on my amp that isn't a mod or unnecessary after doing plenty of pedals. Is redoing heater wires a good start? Well, if you have heater noise and moving them around with a chopstick seems to help, yeah, then redoing that can help. If you don't have noise and moving around with the chopstick doesn't change anything, that you just be doing busy work. I don't know that you need to work on a 68 Super Reverb if it has good electrolytics. The main thing I would suggest, and look in my vintage Fenders playlist, which is what's playing here for you guys, because I just wanted something that would play longer than the 3 hours today. I show getting DC off boards, and that's the main thing in old Fenders, is that the DC builds up in the board because the old fiber boards absorb moisture, get dirty, and they become conductive, and it's relatively easy to get that out. It's painstaking, but it's doing simple things to get the desired result. After that, that and changing out electrolytics and making sure all the grounds are good. That's all you usually need to do. Hey, Brad, I didn't see you there earlier. Getting more noir suggestions. I have worked on a Benson. They are very well made. I did not have to take it apart to repair it, which is one of the good signs. I have not had a rev amp in, so I have no opinion on them. I have been inside Bartell built Tone Kings. They're really well done, really well. A very different company, but I'm not a big fan of the current production stuff. But I've not tried all the models. I saw Rick Beato's top 10 Spotify videos. There were some really good songs on it. I'll have to check that out at some point. They're very hit or miss on the Spotify. I try to keep up with that stuff as much as possible, but you know, Nikki's like, you just don't like it because it's new. I'm like, no, I don't like it because it's bad. You know, it seems to me that overall, with some exceptions, with some of the Latin rhythms that are coming into things, that we're in a period very similar to like 59 to 63, 59 to 64, where it just got very generic for a long time in American pop and rock and roll. And, then it all got shook up when the Beatles came out, and then here comes the invasion, and blues became incorporated into it, and it turned into psychedelia, and then it got bad again, and then got good again. It all comes in cycles. So I'm not listening to new music and disliking it because it's new, but if it's repetitive and predictive, yeah, especially when I can hear the goddamn computer where there used to be a singer. But whatever. Any opinion on Pinto triode switches like they have in the AC15HW? Power scaling is better. Master volumes are better than power scaling. Pinto triode switches in a preamp tube, you're talking about a Pinto like an EF86, are fantastic. Pinto triode switches in the output section are dumb. No power Pinto, no power tube ever sounds as good in triode mode as in Pinto mode, and you don't lose that much volume. I'd rather have a good master volume and amps always in Pinto mode than ever switch the output section to triode mode. It doesn't sound very good. Hey, JP Page 2. Yeah, I do live most Saturdays from 1 to 4 Central Time. So 3 hours with 7-minute intermissions at the top of each hour. That's what I try to do every Saturday that I can, unless I feel like I've been hogging too much of people's times. Hey, Billy Wagner, good to see you. Don't you fucking do that, man. No all caps here. I will shout right back at you, clouds. I have worked on the 63 brown face vibro reverb reissue from the 90s. I don't like them very much. It's one of the very earliest reissue series. They also rebuilt the same thing, pushed the same thing out with some different parts on it as the Vibro Lux, which is not at all a Vibro Lux. But the Vibro Reverb reissue is better than the Vibro Lux that they did with the same thing, the custom Vibro Lux, whatever. But I wouldn't avoid one if you get one that you like the sound of. It can be made much better. But I'm not a huge fan of some of the things they did in there. Hey, Biff. Grew up in Whitehaven a long time ago. I lived in Whitehaven for a year, a long time ago. I'm in Midtown. I'm over here in Cooper Young, not far from Celtic Crossing and all that fun stuff. Hey, John Williamson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you, man. I really appreciate your contributions to the channel. You see things from a more technical perspective in some ways than I do, which makes me very happy when you're very precise technical view of things aligns with my slightly more intuitive view of things. Oh, okay. It's Vinicius. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Obrigado. Building a 2x6v6 combo with bias trim. I have spare tire on the oscillator valve. Is it worth using as a cathode follower to buffer the LFO? Huh. It can be. It certainly can be. I would probably try it just with a single triode, though. I particularly like the way they did it in the Gibson GA18T. I would look at that, and then if you want to play around with the buffer thing, you can, but I don't find it really that necessary. The main thing is balancing out the thump. So compare the GA18 tremolo to the Princeton Reverb's tremolo, and you'll see some things that they added on the Princeton Reverb, which can really help. So a hybrid of those two would probably be absolutely fine, and you could use the other triode for something else or for nothing else. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. Yeah, using more than one amp at a time, people, it's like, okay, you've opened the box and everything comes out now. Now you got to deal with all these other things, and if you don't have some pointers as to where to go, it can get really overwhelming. But yeah, polarity and ground lifts are so crucial. Thanks, man. That's why I'm not using this is in today's stream, because it doesn't really do any. Well, it looks pretty good. It's not as cool as the Sunburst in black and white. It's a really nice guitar, though. Ooh, Black Flag. Well, it's not just the circuit difference. They used different transformers and stuff during that little period. They're working out how to get a higher powered amp with getting away from tube rectification, but they hadn't made all the circuit changes, so they're getting more power, but the filtering hasn't gone up as much. It didn't last very long. It's a really interesting sound. It's not going to be good for everyone. It's not a perfect circuit. It does certain things very, very cool, but I think the rarity of it, because they didn't make it, many of them for very long, has driven up the desirability beyond what the thing actually sounds like. It's like I said in that Germino video back in the day when I had the J1045 come in, and the owner thought it was too dark. I'm like, well, that's what they actually sounded like, the first ones, because he's making the first version. And then later they added a bright cap, which I think this Germino could, to my taste, would benefit from, but it's not my amp. There are a lot of different sounds that people chase, and they think it's the Plexi sound. I mean, which Plexi sound? There's like 27 different sounds, which all use plexiglass on the panel. Hey, did Amnesia? Was a Guitar Center playing a used 2005 Fender 57 Tweed, pre-custom name, cap split up after 25 minutes, and it died. Possible causes after 25 minutes, any idea? Well, yeah. It's a Fender Tweed reissue. They didn't build them very well. And it's from 2005. It's 20 years old. The filter caps are 20 years old. They were never that good. It was never built that well. And one of them blew up. Could also be a bad tube, which took out one of them. There are a lot of things that could cause that. But the nice thing is that you were playing it and you didn't buy it and then find out. I don't think I'm freezing everyone for anyone else. Sorry. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the Bad Lifeson impression there. If a 10 microfarad cathode bypass cap allows full audible range, then why do so many amps use 22 or 25? It's real simple. Leo, who is the person that everyone copied, Leo Fender amps was the first really truly professional amp on the market. And I love old Gibsons, and I love old Gretches, and I love old Ampeg, but they were never built as professionally as Fender. Fender was not building guitar amps. Fender was building an amp that you could play a bass through, that you could play accordion through, that you could run your vocals through, that you could play your fiddle through, that you could play your electric mandolin through, oh, and also electric guitars. And also his idea of what clean of a good electric guitar sound should be is very different than what we have now. So he wanted, and a Rhodes piano. He wanted to be able to play Wurlitzers and Rhodes through the same amp. So he designed it to be full range. This is a bass amp. This is a keyboard amp. This is not just what you need for guitar. It needs to be everything. And so he did that. And everyone pretty much just copied that, including things like a 330 microfarad bypass cap on a JTM45/5F6A. It's ridiculous. No need for that. There is one design aspect where you could say, well, if you have it fully bypassed, above and below, well below the human range of hearing, you're going to reduce all possible hum there, which is true. And there can be some benefit if you have a circuit like the V4 in a typical Fender reverb amp, where you're blending two channels in two triodes, and you have the polarity issues. So you do not want them to interact with each other. So the larger that bypass cap is, it's not about the frequency being passed. It's about keeping the channels isolated from each other. There can't be any local feedback within the tube. 25 or 22 microfarad makes sense there. But there are other places where you can say, hey, I don't need this thing flat down to 7 hertz. I need this thing flat down to 35 hertz. And that's what I will often do when I'm making a change, so that I've talked about this a lot, but every time you do this with your hand, it generates frequencies that we can't even hear, that the output tubes can't reproduce, that the output transformer can't reproduce, but the amplifier itself can, if the cathode bypass caps are huge. So if there's anything down there below 20 hertz, below 30 hertz in that content, the amplifier is amplifying it, and it robs the total amp of available power, because it takes more power to amplify low frequencies than it does to amplify mids and highs. So it makes your amp more efficient, and takes a lot of sludge out, gives you more definition without taking away the stuff that we want. Say you set your high pass at negative 33, 35 hertz. That's more than an octave below the fundamental of a standard tuned guitar. That's more than an octave, that's an octave below a drop D guitar, so. Hey, Magic Matt, that was the 335 into both, into the normal channel of a AB165 Bassman that I did some tweaks to. And I was using my hand-built Klon, though I changed the mid-range response, into my hand-built Zen drive. So both of them stacked. That was what that was, and that was ET65 with the Royer. I won't know till I hear it back whether it truly was delightful. It sounded great in the room, the very mid-rangey. I have no idea how it's going to sound on the YouTubes. Let's see. Making Coke jokes, so we're in the right room. Yeah, I was butchering some Rush. Let's see, next question. I think we're preferred method for cleaning cigarette nicotine tar from an old Fender chassis. We'll start with naphtha. And if naphtha doesn't get it, WD-40. Hey, Chris, 78 Pro Reverb Ultra Linear seems quiet. Replace blah, 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 new analytics. V7 seems brighter than V8, even with hum balance tweak. Well, the visual, the glow you see from the heaters doesn't necessarily correspond to what the actual tubes are, and the hum balance shouldn't affect that. I would measure voltages. What are your voltages throughout the entire amp compared to the voltages to the schematic? And they should be within 10-20% of the schematic. Probably 10% would be a good goal. And I would throw the output on a scope with 1 kilohertz and 400 hertz sine waves, about 250 millivolts at the input, and see what your clean output is. And a Pro Reverb ultra linear should be like, what, 60, 70 watts? Once you have the voltages and you know what your output is, I mean, there could be a lot of things. You could have some oscillations that you're not hearing that are robbing power. You could have a bad solder joint somewhere, a ground that's not good, like a lot of Fenders, including the 78s. That 100 ohm resistor from the tail of the cathode to ground, if that slightly pulls out, or if that resistor is not good, you don't have a full signal from your output from your phase inverter. These are very common things. So know what your voltages really are, and see what the waveform is. Does it seem quiet to you, or is it actually quiet? And if you have a good load into 8 ohm into an 8 ohm load or 4 ohm load in a Pro Reverb, you may have weak sounding speakers. Almost Gone's got several tube amp heads that have sat unused for about 5 years or something. Or should I do anything to get them before using them again? Well, in a real world, you would want to use a current limiter or a light bulb limiter and bring them up on a variac if you want to be absolutely sure. Depends on how old they are, how old the caps are. If you've got 20, 30-year-old caps and they've been sitting unused for 5 years, I would definitely bring them up on a variac. And slowly, and watch for any flashes, or use a light bulb or current limiter, or at least an amp meter, so you could know how much they're drawing. If they're like 10 years old, 5 years old, and they've just been sitting for 5 years, you're probably okay to turn them on, but I can't tell you for sure that you are. I don't know where you live. If you're near a tech, it'd be a very easy thing for a tech to do for you and say, hey, these are fine, or no, this one's got a problem. Because it's much easier to diagnose a failing cap and change it out than to say, yep, that cap blew up. We scattered all this junk everywhere, got to clean the entire thing. I mean, you can have really fiery, messy, nasty, sneaky problems once a cap fails. So depends on the value of the amps too. Hey, Craig bought a 65 AA 165 bassman this week. Is there anything I would do that is really easily reversible to make the bass channel sound better for guitar? I am perfectly happy with the normal channel. Yeah, let me double check the AA 165. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but let me just double check one thing to make sure I'm not giving you the wrong information. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. AA 165 schematic. Thank you, Prowess Amplifiers. Always have the best stuff. Bass channel. Yep, I was right. All right, if you look at the schematic, I'll do this I'll share this so you guys can see it. Let me make sure I don't have any incriminating tabs open. All right, let's see. Where the button for this is. Yes, allow that. All right, there we go. All right, see right up here, we got the 100K plate going to the triode for the input of the bass instrument right here. Across the 100K is a 10 nanofarad snubber cap. That's dumping a ton of highs. You take that out, you're going to have a lot more highs and a much more balanced sound out of that channel. Now let's look here. 500 picofarad, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, deep switch, 8.7K. I think that's what that says. So that's pretty much what you have on this one here. The other thing you want to do on that deep switch, either across on the switch itself, or from where that 0.1, 100 nanofarad cap is attached on the board to the cathode ground, which is right next to it on the board. I put a 1 meg resistor there, or you can put it across the switch, does the same thing. Depops that switch, doesn't change the sound otherwise, but it makes the big thump go away. So just lift one end of that 10 nanofarad cap, and you'll be very glad you did. Now, when I work on the AB165, which has a 500 picofarad cap across the plate resistor, 100K plate resistor of the normal channel, and a 10 nanofarad, same 10 nanofarad across the plate resistor of the base channel. I removed that 10 nanofarad from the base channel plate, but I moved the 500 picofarad from the normal channel to the base channel, because the base channel does sound, I think, a little bit nicer, rolling off a little bit of those highs, a little bit smoother. It's to taste, but you already have that original cap in the app. But there you go. Hopefully you guys were able to see all that. Was that visible to you guys? It looked like it came across. Whenever I change settings on the computer, sometimes things go weird. Okay, cool. There you go. So there's the deep magic. Let's see. I preferred Oxycian crystals there. Good. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate that. Oh, don't. You have an Origin 20, and they're trying to sell you a DGT 15. Well, the DGT 15 watt is an awesome amp, but it doesn't sound like Gilmore. And the Origin 20 is not a very good amp. I hope, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, that the Origin 20 has got some serious issues, including an almost useless master volume if you wanted to sound like Gilmore. But the end result of sounding like Gilmore, you want to have basically a clean Fender style amp, some reverb, some fairly uncolored delay, and maybe a big muff. That'll get you most of the stuff from the wall and later. And you want to get into some other stuff if you want to get into Dogs and Dark Side and all that. They can do, the time thing is Big Muff City. But, the amp itself for Gilmore is clean. If I were to turn on all my effects right here into this Bassman, it would sound like Gilmore if I played the Gilmore thing. I'm not promising that I can sound like Gilmore with my hand issues today, but I've been known to do it in the past. Yeah, Keith, I went black and white on purpose today. Hey, Lucas. Thank you very much. Do I like Marshall, Vox, or Fender? I like all three of them for different reasons. If I had to choose just one, and I'm allowed to make my choice be either an original pre-69 JMI AC30 or one that I built myself, I might choose the Vox because I can make a Vox sound an awful lot like a Fender if I jump the channels. But I love Fenders and I love Marshalls. I don't know. That's how I end up with 9 guitars. If I had any amps for myself, I'd probably have one of each of those, certainly, or one Fender, one Vox, and one Friedman or one Germino. I'm not sure if I would chase the old. I don't know if I'd pay for what the old Marshalls cost, and I certainly wouldn't buy the new Marshalls. Any thoughts on the Carbon X series? I have no idea what that is. Sorry. Why the V-shaped spring layout on your guitar? Better than straight? I found that it balanced better because these springs are under more tension than this spring. And so I find that they give faster. They give slower. It's almost like having a two spring in terms of the response of the arm, but a 3 spring in terms of doesn't go as flat when I bend. So just a feel that I like with 10s. This one's a little bit easier. This one's tuned to E flat. I use the same gauge strings on the standard tuning with the same trim setup. I do it so that it is not decked, but just barely off the surface of the guitar. So, I mean, technically I can pull up a little bit, but I don't. But it means that when it comes back, it's coming back to its own float point. It's not hitting the top. All that's anathema to Mr. Zach there. And am I promoting my own video in the background there? I just wanted to have something showing there in the background other than just photos, because the photo thing on here is, it only gives you like 5 seconds of each. So it's like, it's distracting, which is a shame. I wish you guys could see them. But I thought this might be just something of visual interest, because I don't have anything over there for you. There's me here, and visually interest. I should have something there to balance it out, but that's a walkway. And if I turn the thing so that it's aimed at the walkway, I don't know, it makes the room shrink. Going to the corner like this gives me a little bit of depth for this thing. How would I compare the headroom of a Sir Ombre to a Deluxe for a small gig? Well, if I'm comparing it to a 62 Deluxe, they're about the same. If I'm comparing it to a Deluxe Reverb, the Ombre has no clean headroom. The Ombre is a JTM 45 replacement more than a Deluxe Reverb replacement. It is its own thing, and it's a love or hate kind of thing, because it's not as versatile as people expect from a Fender Deluxe, but it is really good at certain things. So if you want to do ZZ Top's first album without going deaf, get a Sir Ombre and a Les Paul or whatever, and put in the time, because the amp will do it with you. So it an old 62 Deluxe, whereas straight into a Deluxe Reverb, you're never going to get there. Now you can do some other cool things straight into Deluxe Reverb, like a 335. You can get the Mike Bloomfield thing, but it's very different. Where are we? General ethos, I have not had a chance to see that yet. I have to tell you, I don't know that I can. I get a lot of people asking me for advice about, hey, I'm thinking about building this. Should I do this or should I do that? This 3 hours a week is what I give to everyone to answer people's what if questions. Should I do this or should I do that, or how do I do this? I can't really, if I see that email come through, I usually just have to go to the next one. I don't even have time to reply to every email. And I know that's terrible from a business perspective, but I would spend all my time doing emails. I would never get any work done. I need someone to answer emails for me, but no one else can answer them except me. I've been wanting to redo the website with a form. So instead of emailing me, you click on the form. And at the top of that form, it will say, hey, please don't ask me how to build this or what's the best amp kit or how to troubleshoot your amp, because that's what I do. This is what the live stream's for. The rest of the time is like, hey, I own a 67 Deluxe Reverb. I'd like it recapped. I have, or whatever. And I can look at it and say, I'd be glad to, probably about a month and a half before I could take it in, and it may be 2 to 3 months before you get it back, due to my workload. So it's it's tricky. Let's see. Let's see. Waiting to get to the next question. Yeah, the FX-30 is pretty good about the rolling shutter thing. I mean, I could make it happen, but I'd have to really make it happen. And if I were to turn on the active steady shot, even this little would go away from slightly touching the desk, but mainly I just need to focus on not vibrating the desk. The nice thing about it is I can do stuff like this. The entire board moves. Ooh, the entire desk moves. Let's see. Lighting should be better to even out. Well, you know, that's like your opinion, man. When this was in color, this is perfectly exposed, according to Gray Card. And in color, it looks like this, which is perfectly exposed. Neither too bright nor too dark. You're used to seeing all that, but I've got serious hair today. So I'm a little bit in shadow from that, and I don't have the big, I usually have a big white reflector hung up here to give reflections off this, so the side of my face comes up. Isn't quite as dark, and I just didn't hook it up today. So that's where we're at. Oops, there we go. Believe me, I pay attention to lighting, but this is just a real basic black and white conversion in the Ecamm thing. I'm not doing a black and white LUT or anything. Let's see. Will Dr. C brake light cause damage long-term to my vintage 64 Deluxe Reverb? I don't know that anyone needs to use an attenuator with a 64 Deluxe Reverb. They're not that loud to use in the house. I'm not familiar with the Dr. Z brake light. I would want to be 1,000% sure before I want to trust my 1964 Schumacher output transformer to it. But I don't want to disparage Dr. Z's product because I have no experience with it. But I would probably be looking at Fryette and Friedman and stuff over Dr. Z for that kind of thing, based on my own experience. But hot plates are safe, but hot plates do not sound the best. General ethos, I've got so many videos on the channel about deluxe reverb cabs and speaker combinations, but definitely 1x12 with a deluxe reverb, or an external 2x12 or whatever. But I can't tell you what speakers. I've been asked that 6 times in this stream, and I'm not complaining about being asked the same question again and again. But every stream I get asked about speakers for Fenders, and I try to be take each one as if it's the first time I've been asked. But I've got so many videos up on different speakers, and you may listen to them and not like any of them. You may like all of them, and then I haven't solved your problem at all. I'll say that Zach there and almost all my clients really like the ET65 with that. But we also like veteran 30s or vintage 30s here and there, and Celestial Blues have their moments if you watch your output, and like Jumbo Thruster, I answered that question earlier today. Sorry. I still like the custom series best for what you get for the money and the issues it has versus issues it doesn't have. I think it's a very sensible amp, and it sounds really great. Let's see. Hey, Brett. I don't want to click my little ruby heels on this stream. I'd be showing off. Besides, I'm already at home. Let's see. Hey, Lucas, have I ever seen SRV live? Yeah, twice. A lot of people can do somewhat what he does with more gain, but to me, not close to what he had for such feel and strong hands. With his 13-gauge strings, his feel was unreal. Well, yeah, all that's true. But one of the things you have to remember about Stevie Ray, and this is not sliding what you said, is that while he did not have a ton of gain by modern amp standards, he was so loud. So his pickups and his speakers were really interacting at all times. And so he had sustain, and he had all the nuance, and he had a hell of a right hand and a hell of a left hand, and he knew a lot more than he had more cards up his sleeve than he was showing. He always had another gear to shift up to. He was never going full out, though it seemed like it. He never showed all his tricks at once, though it seemed like he was pulling every trick out of the hat possible. And he was a showman, so he made it seem like he was doing really tough things that were just cakewalk for him. And he was doing stuff that would be really hard for a lot of players. That it was just how he touched the damn thing. He had really strong hands. I met him. He was teeny tiny with giant hands. Really nice guy. I met him after his addiction issues, so I was glad to meet him then. Hey, Cat's Music Journey, thank you very much. Just got a film, bought it on a whim from Temu back in the lab. It's gorgeous. Had no expectations, so I'm very impressed. Oh, very good. Yeah, I would love to do shoot with film. I'd love to shoot with black and white film. I just can't afford to, and I cannot trust Temu products myself. But I'm glad you're having good results with it. Yeah, I wish I could afford to do film, but it's just getting so expensive. And I don't think I'm ready for it anyway. I think I'm still learning so much with digital that, and I like the clarity that digital gives over film. And I've shot film all my life, so this is not me being a Luddite or anything, or what's reverse Luddite? Anyway. Hey, Nick Romy. Curious about designs that use the gain stage after the phase inverter. Is it necessary for high power amps? It's called a cathode follower stage, and so it's a more efficient way of driving the tubes because the impedance. Put it this way: the standard Schmidt phase inverter, long tail pair phase inverter, is driving each tube or each pair of tubes from the plate. And plates are not as efficient at driving signals. Driving tubes and being loaded down as a cathode. So what you see in an SVT or the steel string stinger or any other things that have an additional gain stage after the phase inverter, often tube, but it can be done with MOSFETs and stuff, is you take the output of the plate of the splitter. So the splitter tube is just splitting positive and negative copies of it and trying to match the level. Then those are fed to tube stage, which is a cathode follower, and then that drives the output tubes more efficiently. So you can have three 6550s that are behaving very efficiently as opposed to three 6550s that are loading down the previous stage and sacrificing gain and high-end response and introducing unwanted distortions. Does a Neo magnet speaker sound different than the ceramic or even Alnico? I don't know that it has to, but I've not heard a Neo speaker that sounds exactly like the ceramic or Alnico inspirations, let's say it that way. The closest I've heard to one that I would even consider usable is the Neo Creamback. I haven't liked the other Neo speakers I've ever tried or played. Andy says, I saw SRV, it was really freaking loud. Yeah, his guitar stack on stage with like 4 Marshall cabs and 8 Fender combos. His guitar amps on stage were louder than the entire PA. Marshall 2525H or DSL 20HR, which would I choose? Neither. They're not good. They're both amps are bad. Both amps are overpriced. If you want something that does what those things promise to do, look at Friedman's options, including the used Friedman 20-watt versions. Much better amps. There are many different brands that make better amps than those particular models, but Marshall has not made anything since about 1994 that I would ever consider myself or recommend to anyone else. Can I recommend an off-the-shelf tube amp I may find in a big box store just looking for something reliable, 20 watts at most? Yeah. Vox AC15C, either the C or C1 or the C1X. Both of them are fantastic. Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue, the 65, and the Fender 65 Princeton Reverb reissue. Those are the three that you'll find at big box stores that I can recommend. Even if the Fenders may need some work down the road to keep going, they won't need it immediately. The Voxes, usually the stock tubes aren't great. You can change those. Some of the Fenders, the stock speakers aren't the best. You can change those down the road. But in terms of off the shelf, if I had a gig tonight and I had $1,000 and I went to Guitar Center in a store and I found a 65 reissue deluxe reverb, I'd buy that and take it to the gig. Same, and I could get if they have the AC15, I'd prefer that because you can get it for a better price. And they're great. They sound fantastic. Thoughts on Metro 4-hole reissues? Everything George made is great. If you like the sound of the Metros, they're really well built. You can't go wrong. We're about 5 minutes from the end, and I've got so many questions. I won't be able to get to all of them. Like Tall Man, Skinny Lady, I can't tell you how to meet musicians to play with. I'm sorry. Hopefully, maybe some of the other people here in the chat replied to that. Oh, Chris Fit, I'm sorry you found out the hard way about flashes. Yeah, flash batteries. There's a reason the lightsaber in the original Star Wars was built from an old flash, because they had to have a lot of stuff. They had to have a lot of juice because you're discharging a lot very quickly. And some of the questions here are from behind. If I do not reply to your comment, or if I do not read your question, that does not mean that I don't appreciate you being here, and I just won't be able to get to all the questions right now. PRS amps, Dean Harvey. I like the DGT amps, not the others. I avoid most of the others. Best power attenuator on the market right now, I don't know. I would ask Dave Friedman, because I don't keep up with all the attenuators. I know what some of the better load boxes are, reactive loads, but I don't know which straight attenuators are the best ones. Sorry. Trying to make sure I don't miss any super chats or anything where someone's about to hurt themselves with their amp that I can prevent them from. Weber Ferromax, yeah, those are great speakers, Douglas Shaw. That's what they call them. That's what their 12 and 10F series are called, the Ferromax. They're great. They changed the labels later, but the same amps. Oh, I loathe Confederacy of Dunce and Matt. Sorry, Confederacy of Dunce's I find almost maddening. I know many people love it. I cannot. Martin, I do hope to have a pint or raise a glass with you at some point. I'd love that. Let's see. Yeah, we're still back when I was showing the low volume through the basement, which probably didn't work at all on here because of the way things. Man, it is really hard to get audio realistic on YouTube because the playback dynamic response range of all your playback devices, if you're using phones and laptops and iPads and stuff, and the YouTube compression, just you have to get everything squeezed in the top 20 dB. Whereas in the real world, you can hear such a wide range. Let's see. Man, I'll tell you what, when I finish this, I will go back and go through everyone's comments, read them, see everything I missed. Like I'm just now at the last intermission. And if anyone had a question that's really urgent, like, hey, am I going to kill my amp? I'll put it in the comments. Otherwise, we're going to have to try this again. This is one of the busiest chats I've ever had on here. I've had almost 1,700 views throughout this, and like four comments a minute or 4 comments a second. I don't know what that is, and a lot of viewers at once. So I'm not able to get to all the questions this time. This is the most I've ever missed before. And I don't know whether I'm just talking too slow, or you guys are talking too, or you guys are talking too fast, typing too fast at least. All right, we are right at the end, and so we're gonna get to the finish up point. Most fun you've had all week. Wow, Andy, you need to get out more. I'm just a guy talking nonsense to a camera in his room by himself and pretending you guys all exist. Thank you for being my imaginary friends. See you next time. Bye.